This time on the Prop Master, will we finally get to start working on the actual jet pack? I know, exciting, right? And informative. In fact, we should probably stick with informative. So yeah, this is not going to be like a super exciting video. You can kind of think of this one as being the ASMR video of the series, with a lot of me talking and not a lot of actual construction being done on the jetpack. But this is going to be vital information when it comes to taking a stack of templates like this and turning them into the actual pieces that you're going to use to make the jetpack. That being said, this is all stuff that you need to do if you're going to start working on the jetpack. And even though we don't get a lot of work done on the jetpack itself, there's a lot to do in this part. So we really should get started. So once you've printed out your templates, the first thing you want to do is to measure these little rulers that I've got printed out here. They're in inches. And hopefully, as you can see, it's spot on. That just goes to show that your printer hasn't distorted the print in either vertically or horizontally, so that everything should go, the way it should. The next thing to do is to go ahead and just cut out everything. I like to use an X-Acto knife. You can use scissors, whatever you're more comfortable with. I use fairly thin rules here, so you should be able to just line up and cut down that line. And once you have all of your pieces cut out, and there's quite a few, you can start to assemble some of the pieces that are smaller into their larger constituents. I just like to use clear tape. If you'll notice, every piece should be marked with what it actually is. In this case, it's the back right half. And this has multiple parts. This is the most complicated of all the pieces. And you'll notice that, hopefully, let me see if I can zoom in here. As you can see, each connection is both marked with a letter and a color. So we have green A's, red C's, blue B's, and purple D's here. And you just line up everything. You've got, with our new piece, we have A's and B's, and so we slot it in here so that it matches up with my A's here and my B's here. The same goes for this piece where I have the D's attached, and this one where the C's are attached. So it's pretty straightforward. So now that we know that everything's indexed properly, we can go ahead and stick this together. And like I said before, I just use this clear tape. I just take a couple of small pieces, make sure that everything is in the right place. Now I can flip this over. And I usually make sure that it hangs off the end by, just a little bit, a half an inch or so. Then I can wrap this tightly around the end, and that just makes sure that I know that this isn't going to get peeled apart easily. And as you can see, if it's not fully taped, it's very flimsy, but once you get tape on the front and the back, it's actually quite rigid. And oh, by the way, this is all, I printed out all of my templates out on 110-pound index paper. You can do this on regular paper, but by doing it on a thicker, stiffer paper, you're going to make your life a lot easier when it comes time to start trying to transfer this onto your Sintra. Now let me show you one last thing that you might come across, or you will come across when you're doing this. And that is, you have this piece here, and once again, you'll notice that it's bottom tank brace on both of these pieces. There's your A's. Put it together as a big piece here, but then I'm going to remove this gray section. I wanted it to be larger so that you can make sure that you get a nice square connection here, as it'd be a lot harder to get it perfect with this little small amount of material. But by getting this whole thing done, we make sure this thing is, in the right orientation. Now you want to make sure that you've taped this bottom part really well. I mean, you wouldn't want to have only taped this top part, because now I'm going to cut this part out. There you go, and now there's the actual shape of the template. So once you've cut all of your templates out and taped them together where they need to be taped together, which is quite a few pieces, we can go ahead and start to trace these out onto the material that we're actually going to make the jetpack out of. So for this project, you will have to actually trace these out, cut these out of the paper, tack them down like I've done here with just some push pins, and then, or I should say straight pins, and then you're gonna have to trace these out and then remove these. What I did on some of the other projects, like the right van brace, I was able to just take the sheets and glue those down and then use that as my template to cut them out. But if you'll remember, we've got all these smaller pieces that have to be attached to other pieces to make larger pieces. And so you can't really do it the other way. You're gonna have to actually take the time to cut these templates out, put them together, tack them down, and then we're gonna have to trace them out onto the material that we're actually going to make the jetpack out of. And what that material is Sintra. It's basically, it's just a PVC foam board that's usually used for sign making, but can be used for other things as well. In this particular case, it's 1/4 of an inch thick, which is roughly 6 millimeters. And in the United States, we call it Sintra, although there are some other brands as well. It's called other things in other parts of the world, but they're all PVC foam board. And like I said, that's usually used for signage. So sometimes you can buy this stuff at sign shops. I bought this on Amazon. And in my case, these are in 24-inch by 16-inch sheets. That's about 40.5 centimeters this way by 61 centimeters that way. And even though it's pretty durable stuff and it's quite rigid, you can still easily put a straight pin into it without any trouble at all. And I should say, this is not all of the pieces. These are all of the pieces that will consist of only one thickness of this 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter thick Sintra. I have several other pieces that will need to be thicker, and on several of them, some of them won't say anything, but lots of other ones will say, like this one says 1/4 inch PVC foam board. Whereas this one over here says 3 layers of 1/4 inch Sintra PVC foam board. This one here is 3 1/4 inch sheets. So several of these are 3. This one's actually 4 1/4 inch. So there are some that we're going to have to cut out multiple times and glue them together, or probably more likely is I'll take some sections and glue 4 of those together and then cut these out of a already glued together piece, but we'll get to that. There's also this large piece here that is also just 1 piece thick, but it's unfortunately too large, just barely too large for 1 single sheet to get both halves of this. So we're gonna have to deal with that separately as well. So now we have all of our pieces that are just 1 layer of Sintra thick. Let's go ahead and outline them. Now I've got a fairly fine point marker here. Whatever you use, just make sure that when you cut this out, try to cut out on the inside of the line. I'm trying to pick a thin enough line that it's not as important, but and you'll also notice that I've lined these up so that, as well as I can, some of my longer edges are the outside edges of the board. Now do take note this little tail of this one piece is not straight across, it comes down at an angle. This one, actually, I could leave this one and just glue it down because it also has these lines on there. I'll probably end up just having to glue this back onto this piece after I cut it out. So I'm going to need something to guide me when I cut these lines out later on. Okay, and I'd like to say that's everything, but unfortunately, when you look in the description, most of these pieces will say right side tank brace top cover, and because it has a right side, that means I'm going to have to flip this over and do a left side as well. A couple of these, yeah, this one's actually a left side, which means I'll have to flip it over and do a right side. This one does not have a side, but I believe all the rest of these do. Let me go ahead and, well, actually, we're not quite ready to cut these out yet. What we have to do now is take the pins out, and I need to transfer the pertinent information that's on here this is going to be a lot easier if I'm able to write. This is the right side trim. This is toward the back. And that's everything that I need on that. You know, I don't need to worry about any of the things for, you know, putting the templates together. I just need to know that this is the right side trim and that that's up and that's back. This I'm not really gonna have to label so much because I'm gonna have to put this back onto it, so I'll have these lines. push pins are falling apart. I keep saying push pins, but these are not push pins, they're straight pins. If you notice, I have all these pins kind of going in from the outside to the inside, and that kind of keeps everything held down to the surface. At least that's the idea. Here I put bevel marking guide. I'm not sure 100% what that means right now, but we'll get to it later and I'll figure it out. You have to remember that I figured all this stuff out like a month ago, and then I had to make all the templates, and sometimes I'll have to figure out what frame of mind I was in when I was cutting everything out and labeling them. But I'll figure it out when the time comes. Okay, and now I've got everything marked. I can go ahead and cut this out of the bandsaw. You can also use a skill saw, reciprocating saw, whatever, even a coping saw would work fine for this. However, what kind of instrument you want to use to cut these out, you go ahead and do that. I'm going to do it on the bandsaw, and I'll be right back. Now that I have all of these pieces cut out, we can move them to the side. And I've just taken all those very same pieces of the template and I've flipped them over and I've copied all the information that was on the other side, except for if this, for instance, was the tank upper side trim right, I've changed it to left. If in this case it was the upper tank brace cover left, I've changed that to right. And we're just going to do this all over again. We'll outline it and cut it out. Not good. I think I might need to add a couple of more pins to some of these thinner pieces. I think that's pretty much just that one piece that's thinner, but also notice that I don't have any of these in the corners because You can test to see if one of these edges is straight, but the odds of this corner being, the one on the template being a perfect 90-degree angle and the one that you're trying to work with being a perfect 90-degree angle are unlikely to happen. So it's okay to use one edge and not have to cut that out, but it's unlikely. I mean, it's possible, but if you have to make sure that if you're using a corner here, you have to make sure that both your template and that corner match up perfectly. Unfortunately, now I have to do just like before and I have to transfer all this information again. It can be a challenge writing upside down and backwards. Some of this information might seem like it's a little redundant and you don't really need it, but you never know when you're going to be assembling this and that little bit of information, make sure you don't put it on upside down or something. I never realized how much I could forget when I work things out in my head, so sometimes you just have to write it down. Got that backwards. One thing to be wary of is I only discovered later that in this particular case, my Sintra came with a protective plastic sheet over one side of it. So if you write all that stuff down, it's probably going to work, but it might smear. But if you pull that protective cover off, it'll work fine. So let's just go ahead and cut these out and we can go on with the project. Okay, so here we have all of the left and right side pieces. Well, almost all of the left and right side pieces, because we also have this piece. And in the end, it'll just be one piece, but we do need to do it in a right and left side. I've gone back and forth as to what the best way to do this is. Either glue two, okay, let me go back. The problem with this is that it is 1/4 of an inch too large for both sides of this to fit on one piece of my Sintra. So I'm going to have to glue two pieces together, but I couldn't decide whether or not to glue them together first and then put this on. But I've decided that what I'm going to do is to cut this out on two pieces of Sintra and then glue them together, just because it'll be smaller pieces and easier to work with. Here is my full-size sheet of Sintra, and you can see if I line this up at the bottom, it is 1/4 of an inch too tall for this piece of Sintra. If I go this direction, and it looks like it's gonna fit, but then if I flip it over in the right way, you'll see that it's, well, you may not be able to see the camera, but it's a 1/4 of an inch too wide this direction. So I've got no choice but to do this in 2 sections and glue them together. And I've decided to cut them out separately. So the important thing is you have one of your true 100% straight edges, and you want to line up this inside line on that, because it's going to be very important that I get a perfectly straight line on both ends to glue together. And even though this is a very large piece and I could probably get away with just holding it, I'm going to go ahead and tack it down. And this should be a 90-degree angle, so it looks pretty good. It feels like it's flush all the way around, or all the way along this line here. So we can go ahead and mark this. And I want to go ahead and mark the end and beginning points of these bend lines. Okay. Now let's go ahead and draw those bend lines. Now I'm really hoping that I'll be able to bend this with the heat gun to get those same contour that we did in the prototype. If it doesn't work, then I'll have to go ahead and these won't be bend lines anymore, they'll be cut lines. But hopefully I'll be able to just heat these and bend them. They're not going to be as sharp, but that's okay. It should be more of a, you know, more of a gentle curve into the right shape. You'll see when we get there. So let's go ahead and transfer our markings here. Although it's pretty obvious what this piece is, but you know, let's stay with the theme here. First of all, let's go ahead and mark our bends. I like to mark everything just because you never know when something happens and you end up not working on the project for a while, and it's any information that you can put on here so that, you know, if you come back in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, you'll be able to figure out, you know, what it is you're trying to do. And might as well go ahead and put on here that this side faces out, so that we know this is the part that faces your back. Now let's go ahead and get a completely separate piece and do that side also. Before I do that though, I'm going to go ahead and mark up the back. So this is going to be back left. And since we've already got that marked on there, we probably don't need to transfer that over. I'm going to go put this on a window. I don't think I can show this where you can see it, but I'm going to line this up on a window so that I can see those marks, so that I can mark them, basically the bend lines. So I'll be right back. So all I did was lay this up against a window so that I could see the other side of it through the back here, and I marked the ends of all these pieces and marked them just like I did on the other side. Lined everything up, put it in place, so let's go ahead and trace this one out as well. tend to inspect the line afterwards because sometimes I end up going outside a little bit, or in other cases it can push the paper in a little bit. Let's mark the ends of these again. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut these out individually, and then we can come back and glue them together. So here are my pieces cut out. These, as well as the other ones that I cut out, are they perfectly cut out? No. This is too thick to use a straight edge and an X-Acto knife to cut out. I just had to do it on the bandsaw and just, get it as close as I can. It's all close. They're within, the width of a line one way or the other, but they're not 100%, and that's fine. This is all going to be glued together, and then there's going to be some filling of gaps and things like that. Shouldn't affect it too much as far as strength goes. I think it's all going to be fine, but I do need to glue these two pieces together. And in fact, you can take a look here. If I line these top edges up, which I know these are perfect because they were the straight edges that existed before I cut anything. If I line those up, there's definitely a little discrepancy down here at the bottom. It's not perfectly straight across. There's maybe a 132nd of an inch difference. I don't know. You can feel it, but it's not much. That's gonna be fine. But I wanted this center line to be perfectly straight and perfectly matched up so I can glue this with the strongest possible joint. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I didn't cut this edge. I wanted to make sure these were the perfectly straight edges that came with the Sintra. I'm going to glue these together with just some CA glue. I tried several things, and the CA glue seems to give me the strongest bond. I've just got a piece of some scrap paper here that I put down. I'm just going to run some of the CA glue down the edge. See if I can find something just to spread it out a little bit. I'm going to lay this flat so that I can know that the bottom edge, or the inside part of the jetpack, which is going to come in contact with the other parts, that's perfectly flat. I'm lining it up at the top. Okay, I'm going to give that a couple of minutes to make sure that it's completely cured, and we can go on from there. It's been a couple of minutes, and I'll be surprised if this hasn't glued to the paper, and of course it did. But I can clean the paper off. I didn't want this glued down to this piece. Just got my sanding stick here, and I suspect I can take care of any of this paper. Now this side is not visible at all, so I just want to make sure there's no loose paper and that there's nothing that's sticking up. So the fact that there's still some paper on here doesn't really bother me. I don't think it's going to be structurally a problem because the CA glue is soaked all the way through it, and it's sort of become, reinforced CA glue, but I want to make sure that this is perfectly flat, and that's going to work just fine. Now we come over to this side, and I want to sand this as well, but not because I'm trying to remove any paper, but because the thicknesses of these two pieces of Sintra are ever so slightly different. And this side is slightly thicker, so I want to try to smooth that out just a little bit. I don't want to sand too much because I want to make sure, basically this is PVC foam with a thin layer of PVC on each end of it. So I don't want to get through that sort of solid bit of PVC to where there's only PVC foam, because that's going to really affect how strong this joint is. Okay, and this is actually a plenty strong, glue joint, but this is also the back of the jetpack, and everything sort of attaches to this, which will make this stronger in the long run, but also, since this is what everything attaches to, I'd just as soon make this as strong as I can. This is just a thinner piece of Sintra. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. And it's not really big enough, but I'm going to cut a thin strip of it, and I'm going to go ahead and glue it over the top of this joint on the outside, because this will be up against your back. It's not going to be visible. You're not going to feel this little piece of Sintra that's stuck to the back, and it's not going to affect where everything attaches on the, the back side here, but it will strengthen this glue joint quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe an inch wide piece, and let me cut that off, and then we can get to gluing this. I'll probably cut 2 strips, and then I may glue them together all the way down. Oh, and don't forget to remove your protective plastic layers. Okay, so I have 2 pieces cut here, and I'm just going to glue them, just like you can see right there, over this crack. And I could use CA glue for that, but for this I'm going to use this PVC glue, just like you would use to connect PVC pipes. I didn't use it for this end, edge to edge glue here, because mostly what you're gluing together here is the PVC foam that's in between these solid pieces of PVC, and it just doesn't make, when you melt that foam together, it just doesn't make a very strong joint. So the CA glue that can kind of soak into the foam and make a more solid surface gives you a much better joint. But where we can actually take the PVC, the harder outside part of the foam, and glue that to another hard outside piece of foam, you get a much stronger, more versatile joint if you use this weld bond stuff that actually melts the PVC together into one solid piece. And I'm not trying to be super precise here. I'm just going to, with my eye, make sure that looks like it's about the center, and I'm going to line it up with the top. I'm going to draw some lines, and I could use a marker on this as well, but I just want to make sure I have some lines to go by. I mean, obviously marker is not going to be a big problem here because I've used it everywhere else. Okay, I'm going to go get my ventilator, because this stuff is not great in indoors. So I'm going to turn my fan on, and I'm going to get my ventilator and, my respirator, and we'll start gluing. Oh, and by the way, when I said the width of this, it's 25 millimeters or 1.5 centimeters. So 1 inch or 1 or 2.5 centimeters. Okay, let's go ahead and start gluing this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put down this purple primer, and then after that we'll go back with the actual PVC cement. Honestly, gloves would be a great idea for this as well, so I'm going to do that also. Just going to wait a second for that to dry. As usual, the lighting's not great here, and you can see a lot better than I can, so I'm hoping that I'm getting everything here. I'm being extra messy today, it seems. Okay, so then just drop this in place. I like to kind of wiggle it when I'm pushing down to make sure it's in the right place. Do the same with this one. Okay, these are just some heavy pieces of metal that I've got. I'm going to use them to kind of hold everything down. And I'll let that wait just a little bit, and then we'll take a look at it. It's been a little over 30 minutes, which is long enough that this should be cured well enough that you can handle it pretty roughly. To be fully cured, you have to wait 2 hours, but this should be plenty well attached for what we're going to be doing with it, which at the moment is really nothing. But so we have this piece, and this is what we have left. Let's move these out of the way. And as you can see, this is what we have left. And you can kind of make a choice. You can either cut these out of like MDF or some sort of particle board, or what I'm going to try to do is to make this out of several layers of the Sintra. Let's see, this one is 1 inch. I think the rest of these three are 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, 3 layers, 3/4 of an inch, and 3/4 inch sheets of PVC. Yeah. So these three need 3 sheets of 1/4 inch PVC, and this one needs 4. Now, this and these two will need to be, this is a left, this is a right, and this is a right, so we'll have to do a left, and a right for this. So I think what I'm going to try to do is lay these out in a way so that I can get 3 layers. This is one of the pieces that was left over from cutting the back out. So that's 2 layers. What I'll end up doing is, just like we put that reinforcement on the back, we're going to glue up 3 layers of this Sintra, but I don't want to waste 3 whole sheets of Sintra for this. I'm just going to use as much as it's going to take to lay out these pieces. It'll have to be enough to do 2 of these, and then for one area I'll just put a 4th extra strip on and do that. You'll see it. Let's go ahead and see if we can't come up with a layout that can get these into the smallest spaces I can get it into. Okay, I think I have a way that I can do this with the scrap pieces that I have left. So far I've used 4 full sheets of the Sintra. And the biggest sheets that are left over are the pieces that are cut off of the ends. You know, essentially these parts were here, and you know, I cut down this edge, and that gives me a pretty good sized strip on each end of the backpack pieces, or the back piece pieces. And then I took a 5th piece and just cut that down the middle, which gives me 2 more strips this size. So I think that plus the other scrap that's left over from cutting the back pieces out, I think I can make that work for the rest of these pieces. So I'm starting out with the tank lower side trim. I'm going to place this in the bottom left corner of this piece. I don't think I'm going to write this whole little paragraph here, but I will have to try to remember this when I assemble that. Maybe I will. I suppose I could also just say, see template for instructions. But from here, I want to then flip it Okay, I don't feel the need to write this paragraph again over here because I've already got it there. Next I have this piece. Curious if this will fit in there. That will fit in there. Okay. In that case, put this in here, set it up so that the circles where the tanks go face down into here. Make sure you give yourself enough room. So I have room to put this here, but I just need to remember that this one needs 4 layers and not 3 layers. And when I cut these sections off of here, I used the rip fence on the bandsaw, so I know this is a straight edge. So I'm able to use, you know, this right up against here. If you didn't do that, then you want to probably give yourself a little bit of space to make sure you get a nice straight edge. So maybe move this away from that edge so you'll have something to cut. Before I do that, I'm going to mark this. Okay, now I can go ahead and outline this. I just don't want to cut this out yet. And this is the right side one. Okay, so remember this has this little piece that angles down in the back, so I can't just lay this up against the bottom. Okay, now that we have these laid out, I can go ahead and glue all three of these together into one stack of 3/4 inch Centra. And we'll start out by doing these two large sections. I've never tried to glue this large an area together, so hopefully it'll work out just fine.
I will say this, be sure that you have already removed the protective plastic coat that they put a little sheet of plastic over here to protect it. That's not going to work if that's there, so remove that. Just going to give that about a minute to dry. Okay, this one will be a little bit harder because I can't see it as well as I can the purple stuff. You want to avoid really big globs, but that's not easy to do when you can't really see what you're doing. And that's probably good enough, but I'm going to go ahead and put some weights on here to kind of hold it down. All right, I'm not going to wait the full 30 minutes, but I'll come back in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's take these weights off and put the last 1/4 inch piece of Sintra on.
See if this little brush helps at all. Honestly, I still can't tell what's getting glue and what's not. Okay, we'll give this a full 30 minutes now and come back and take a look at it. Honestly, I'm starting to think that maybe, these pieces should be made out of MDF. Get a sheet of 3/4 inch MDF and a sheet of 1 inch MDF. That might be the better way to do it, but, we're going to see if we can't make this all out of Sintra. We'll see.
Okay, let's take a look. Everything seems good and tight. Hopefully, this will be completely welded all the way across, and we don't have, when we cut these parts out, hopefully nothing will be loose. So let's go ahead and cut all the stuff out, and I'll hopefully remember not to cut this one out because this one is going to require one more layer of Sintra. So let me cut these out and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's my piece that we're going to need to add another section of Sintra to before we actually cut it out for real. And I'll say that this was actually so close to the other pieces that I ended up using, a little, I would call it a saber saw, but a jigsaw, or it's not really a jigsaw, but like a reciprocating saw or a hand saw, or whatever you want to call it. But let me go ahead and do the rest of them. Everything's been going pretty well, but when I was cutting this piece out, this little end here, I can see where the pieces are pulling apart right in this little area here where it's so thin. So I'm just going to super glue them. It's one of those times when you really need 3 hands. I'm just going to try to push as much super glue in there as I can. Squeeze it. Also going to try to clean off all this excess super glue now before it glues my fingers to this. Okay, everything else seems pretty tight. Oh, no, this whole section must have gotten missed when I was gluing everything together, so. But so far, this has been the only piece that I have seen it try to come apart, so I did a reasonably good job of smearing glue around when I was laminating everything together. But if you see anything coming apart, just get some super glue and see if you can't put it back together. At this point, even if only the outside edges are glued, that's going to be enough. You know, we couldn't just glue the outsides of the whole thing because we're cutting these little pieces out. But once the pieces are cut out, as long as they're whole, if there's a little section here in the middle that's not glued, that's totally fine. Okay, let me continue on with the cutting out. So here's all of our pieces cut out, and let me tell you right now, some of these cuts are fairly atrocious. I did not do a great job. One of the advantages of using the bandsaw is that you get nice 90-degree cuts, and using my skill saw or saber saw, whatever you want to call it, I got some fairly atrocious cuts in here. However, this is an internal support. Those little gaps will not be a problem, and if they are, I can just fill them with caulking. Shouldn't be a problem at all. So now we have to deal with this tank upper side trim, and I've got this one with 3, and then I've also got to cut out a left side, which I don't have any of. We have our last piece of leftover foam here. And all I want to do is to cut, I want to mark, I want to mark the outline of what this looks like. Not the actual piece, but just this piece that I've cut out. Probably should have given myself a little bit more room, but that should work. Now let me cut this piece out, and we'll go ahead and start gluing these pieces up. For the other piece, as you can see, I've got plenty of room here to cut 4 strips of foam out. I guess there's enough room for 1, 2, 3, and then 4 up here. But first, let me go ahead and cut this out. Okay, so here is the piece that I just cut out that goes with this. And I also have 4 pieces that I cut from that last sheet that I had. This one's obviously smaller than the others, but it's also big enough for that. So I'll put this one on top to make sure that everything lines up. So now I just have to glue this onto that, and then glue these 4 pieces together like I did the other stuff. At least they're not such a wide area this time that it should be a lot easier to see what I'm doing as far as gluing them together. So let's get started. I can go ahead and do this while I'm waiting for it to dry on the other piece.
Once again, I think it would probably be fine if I just left that the way it is, but it can't hurt to put a little clamping power down. Okay, and now we can go ahead and work on these. Starting to run dry on cement here. I didn't want to get too much glue up here where it's going to be sticking out, so I just kind of held that up against there to see how much area needed to be glued. Okay. I'm holding these up so I can see the glare or the reflection of the glue itself in the light and see where I've glued it and where I haven't. Okay, and let me put some weights down on these. Okay, and then in 30 minutes we can go ahead and glue these two back together to give us 4. And I think I'm probably going to go to the store and buy some more cement because I'm just about out. So see you in about 30 minutes to an hour. Okay, we can pull this off now. Okay, this one's good. That's good as well. That one's not great. It's actually not as bad as I thought, but let's go ahead and put some super glue in there. Okay, I'll let that go for a few minutes. Okay, that should be good. Let's go ahead and take those off, and then we'll go ahead and glue this whole thing, or glue these two together. So, they didn't have the same glue. They had this stuff, which is supposed to be a single step, so you don't have to put the blue stuff on there. At least that's my understanding. So I haven't tested this, but hopefully it'll work just as well. And let's go ahead and do these two and see how it works out. Now the directions actually say to put a coat on the first one, a coat on the second one, and then go back and put another coat on the first one again. I think the others said the same thing, but it definitely slides around more than the other one did. I think by now the other one had already stuck. We'll give this 30 minutes and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Hopefully it'll be stuck together at that point.
Okay, it's been 30 minutes and let's cross your fingers and see if this works. Okay, it seems to be completely glued down. That's good. I was a little worried because of how it was still able to move it, for quite a while. Whereas with these, when I put the outer layers together, they would go together and within a couple of seconds they were stuck. I do feel you can kind of see some areas there where it's not, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's not 100%, but it's really well stuck, so I guess we cut it out and then we can deal with any loose areas with some super glue. Okay, so now what I haven't decided yet is if I should cut this piece down and transfer that line, and I still don't know if I should do that yet or not. Here's the problem. I should have gone the other side. I think it should be okay though. It'll just make this side the top. So, okay, as strange as this is, I'm just going to go ahead and write this part. So even though we cut it out from this side, this will be the side we actually use. Now we can go ahead and cut these two out. Okay, so we have these pieces now, and they're in good shape. I think they're going to work fine. However, I was trying to remove the piece of the glove that I accidentally glued onto here, and I kind of messed up my notes, so let's fix that real quick. And so as you can see, even though I actually marked this side of the piece, or maybe that was this one, we now have opposite sides now, so that's good. So now we actually finally have all of the pieces that we need, except for the PVC pipes and stuff, but we have all the basic pieces that we need to make the jetpack. Or maybe I should say this is all the parts that we need, minus the PVC pipes, for the basic jetpack. I hope you found this video helpful, maybe even a little bit entertaining. Okay, maybe not this video, but let's say informative. That's a good one. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I know that some of this stuff can be confusing and complicated, but it doesn't matter how trivial you think it is. Ask the question and I'll answer it as soon as I come across it. Hopefully that day. I mean, it really is the comments that keep me motivated to keep this channel going. And if I don't get any comments, I kind of feel like no one's watching the video, and that really affects how motivated I am to make more videos. You know, I'm really looking forward to taking these parts and putting them into something that starts to make sense and look interesting, and that can be helpful to you. That's really going to be the fun part of this whole project. And I'm looking forward to really getting started on that. So until next time, thanks.